This is the Excellerator All-Natural Livestock Lowdown Podcast. This episode is presented by High Noon Feeds Western Division. Feed the dream with products that have been proven time and time again. Call Clint Cummins at 805-550-9857. That's 805-550-9857. Now here's your host, Jerry Fender.
In this episode, we explore managing heat stress with Excellerator, exploring the significant negative effects of heat stress on show animals' health, growth, and well-being, offering heat management tips, and how feeding Excellerator can help reduce hot weather issues. We'll be back with Clint Cummins, owner of High Noon Feeds Western Division, and Michael Officer, Director of Research for Pacer Technology, the manufacturer of Excellerator All Natural.
Champion results come from the best feeds. Livestock raised for the show ring need to grow and develop at optimal rates to compete at the highest level. Genetic potential can only be reached by proper feeding practices. Excellerator is an all-natural feed additive designed for livestock and show animals. Excellerator is the easiest way to promote gut health. Excellerator can optimize your feeding practices and is shelf-stable. Optimum growth, performance, and health with Excellerator All Natural. Get more information and order online at acceleratorallnatural.com. acceleratorallnatural.com.
And welcome to another edition of our podcast here. Today we have Clint Cummins with High Noon Show Feeds and Michael Officer, the Research Director for Pacer Technology. Clint, we'll start with you. It is hot. It is summer. Do you believe people listening in realize how the heat of summer will affect the well-being of their animals?
Well, I hope so. It's interesting. That's a good question. Theoretically, yes, everybody should realize how the heat of summer can affect. But basically, I think sometimes we don't always use common sense with animals. And the real reason why I say that is I believe a lot of people who have animal projects that don't probably have a lot of animal husbandry background, and maybe it's just human nature, but when we plan our schedule for the day, or we plan our schedule for, leading up to the fair and feeding our animals and preparing our animals, we always want everything to fit in our normal schedule. However, Mother Nature and heat and cold and wind or rain or snow, she doesn't worry about our schedule. And so we've always got to be on guard when it comes to heat and stress, the summer, and the effect that it has on animals, and especially ruminant animals. Because I don't think a lot of people understand the rumen and how the ruminant works. And heat can have effects. So to answer your question, I hope all of them realize how heat can affect animals, but I guess the answer to it is common sense and treating those animals kind of like you treat yourself or your children when it comes to heat and stress.
Okay, so common sense and basics is a lot of what happens when it comes to this. And with that said, Mike, one of the basics, what is heat stress on the animal?
Well, I think I want to lead with saying heat stress is a dangerous situation. In humans, we call it heat stroke. And the reason we call it that is that the symptoms of heat stress causes our bodies to react as if we are having a stroke. But basically the definition is that it's basically a condition that occurs when the animal cannot maintain its normal internal body temperature when exposed to high external temperatures. The normal temperature for healthy livestock is typically around 102 degrees. Now, this will vary a little bit by age, breed, environmental conditions like wind blowing, the humidity. But basically, heat stress is considered to be those negative effects, and they're sometimes serious, that on the animal as its internal body temperature rises beyond that 102, and they start somewhere around 103.
So it can obviously kick in pretty fast in a hurry, I guess is what I would say. So, Mike, with that then, stress, obviously, of the higher than normal body temperature, how does that really affect the animal?
Well, this this higher than normal body temperature comes from two elements. First, we have to consider that when animals eat, there is a digestive process and a fermentation process that produces heat. So that's a natural occurrence in digestion that animal under normal conditions can dissipate very easily. But now we're talking about another factor, and that is the elevation of our outside temperature. And so when we take the digestion of feed, we call that the heat of digestion. So when the heat produced from feed digestion is compounded by that higher environmental temperature, which basically we look at 72 degrees being the starting point for heat stress for large ruminants, and the sheep and goats start getting stressed when the temperature rises above 84 to 86 degrees Fahrenheit. So the animal's body will experience physiological issues ranging from mild, moderate, severe, and then extreme levels depending on the internal body temperature of the animal as it tries to dissipate this excess body heat from those two sources. And again, they're the heat of digestion. Added to that is the heat of the ambient temperature outside, and that animal's internal body temperature just continues to rise faster than it can cool itself back down.
Okay, and Mike, you mentioned physiological stress levels, the mild, moderate, the severe, and extreme. Depends on the body temperature. So obviously, animals are going to show signs just like humans do when they get under stress like this. Can you run us through that real quick?
Sure. Well, first of all, when heat stress starts to occur, you'll see that the animal will reduce its feed intake. And that feed intake then lowers the heat of digestion. And under normal conditions, that's will be enough. So then you'll see an animal start increasing its rate of respiration or panting. And then also under more severe conditions, you'll get vasodilation, which is basically pushing blood to the surface of the body to help dissipate the body heat. The danger of this is if you have a prolonged heat period, you might end up seeing damage to organs, the brain, reproduction, you'll see gut health problems and immune function. But to your question on how these range, mild heat stress, they may only see a mild to fast panting, but with a closed mouth. They're not really under much distress, but the panting is a way to get that hot. Of course, panting is coming through the lungs, so you've got the blood cooling through panting. So we have to think of this as, first of all, look at the thermometer. If you're in the 80s, your livestock are probably experiencing very mild heat stress. But as the temperature goes to 90 or to 100, you're going to move up to moderate and severe. So under moderate heat stress, the animals pant more. They have to open their mouth wider. The tongue's not extended though, because they're able to get enough movement of air that they're moving that heat out of the body. So let's move into the 100-degree weather, where we call that severe heat stress. This is a very rapid open mouth panting. The animals are trying to stand or lay in a position where they can expel as much hot air from their lungs as possible. The head's held up, the tongue is extended. Extreme body heat is a very, very severe situation. If the animal's body temperature reaches 105 degrees, that's considered critical. Body cells start to die at 107. So it's a very narrow range of temperature degrees before these physiological effects occur. But in that extreme heat condition, that's a very high risk of fatalities. So again, they're doing all of the panting, open mouth, tongue out, head often lowered. They're spreading their front legs to try to get more respiration volume. And the downside of this, if situations are prolonged in this severe to extreme area, not only is the fatality likely, but definitely internal organ damage will occur, which will lead to just a poor doing animal later on.
Definitely some interesting and very important things to keep in mind as you're watching your animals. All right, Clint, we'll come back over to you. And as we have discussed previously, you're a show judge, you're a show lamb breeder. What impact then does heat stress have on animals being fed for a show? Because there's more stress there too, right?
Oh yeah, no. So the concern is like Mike had discussed, is if your animals have heat stress or you're feeding these animals when it's extremely hot, you're going to find probably most of the time they're less feed intake, right? Which consequently is going to lead to weight loss. And then the biggest concern for that is especially if you're trying to go to the county fair, which you're probably most people are going to their county fair, trying to hit a target point. So there's two concerns there. The one, you're trying to make them make weight that you can show. And then secondly, the judge is grading you on market readiness. And so if your animal consequently is not eating as much, the feeding tech goes down, then automatically you have weight loss and automatically can result into health issues. But then the consequence is you have an animal that may not make weight. And then consequently, if it does make weight, it didn't meet its optimal condition in terms of market readiness, and you may not make the sale, the grade to make the sale. So, heat stress can play such a major role in market animals and the success of that project. And then consequently, too, is if you have breeding animals, the reproduction and breeding issues that you can get into, because automatically, anytime that animal is experiencing heat stress, then automatically it's having health issues and problems. And then like Mike had said, that if heat stress continues and gets worse, then the ultimate is death. So heat stress is something that we need to be really extremely aware of. And because there's so many factors that it can play into. So it can have a major effect on animals being fed for a show or even breeding.
Okay, and so, Clint, continuing along that line, obviously we can't control the weather, but there are some things that we can do to help alleviate the stress on the animals.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, again, this kind of goes back to common sense. Always provide clean and fresh water. Always. I mean, clean out those water buckets, even if it's not even that's something that you need to do, even when it's not in the middle of the summer or heat. But one of the most important things that you can do for an animal is always provide clean and fresh water. You will see the performance and the health of those animals improve. Again, the environment, the management of the environment that you're putting them in, provide shade and fans or water misters, anything that you can create an environment that's more conducive for them to overcome heat stress. One of the major factors is you want to feed Excellerator to improve feed efficiency and nutrient intake, and then heat of digestion. So automatically, the healthier that your animal is, then automatically it's going to be better conducive to handling heat stress. And then also to provide nutrient dense seeds and reduce or remove poor quality forage. And that's another one that's very important. The quality of your hay is very important. I might even go to the point where we do it, and we don't live in a real hot area, but we might change from alfalfa to a orchard grass hay, just because we believe, and I don't have the scientific facts, and Mike might be able to weigh into it, but we believe that the legume, the alfalfa, is going to feed hotter what the orchard grass hay or Timothy grass hay or some kind of pasture mix that you're going to have. And then lastly, if you do have breeding animals, you really don't want to graze in the heat of the day and feed, you want to feed during the cooler times of the morning and evening. So again, common sense and practicality and whatever's in the best interest of the animal.
Okay, now, Clint, for lambs, sheep specifically, when it comes to wool length and shearing, anything there about the wool keeping the heat in, increasing the animal's body temperature?
Mike had mentioned that you don't want to be 1 inch of staple length, helps dissipate heat, but anything longer than that will not dissipate heat as well. So I would say that probably most people that are showing lambs are going to have lambs that have less than 1 inch of wool. It takes a while for a young lamb in its age to mature to get to a 1 inch staple length. But I would say that probably most people that show lambs are going to, if they don't jackpot them and they're just going to one fair, they'll probably shear them once a month. Another thing that people don't think about maybe with sheep can sunburn. So if you do shear and it's hot and you don't have really good shade, you want to lock them into a shade for a couple days because that lanolin out in the heat can sunburn them when it gets hot. And we'll kind of put like a blanket, a summertime blanket on them or a wintertime blanket. But if we're talking about heat stress, we put a summertime blanket trying to protect them from sunburn. And then also, too, I think it does a better job of keeping the lanolin, I don't have the word for it, but it's kind of like comparing, somebody's arm that's been outside the window and a baby's butt. When you go to get those animals ready for the fair, you want that skin to be like a baby's butt, not like your arm that's kind of been taken to the sun. So I do think that I'm getting off subject here, but if you are going to shear during the summer, make sure that the common sense is that you just don't turn them out in a pen, because sometimes they'll just lay out in the sun and you're like, oh my goodness, my sheep got sunburned. So
Excellent points there, Clint. A lot of people might not even think about that, but once you say it, it makes perfect sense. Okay, Mike, we'll switch back over to you. We've talked about it a little bit. Clint mentioned it. We've talked about it before. But how does Excellerator help manage the effects of heat stress specifically?
Yes, I think the comment made that feeding Excellerator is a very important part of this heat stress prevention. And primarily it's because our research has shown that the way Excellerator works in the animal is that it helps to reduce that heat of digestion. And the way it does that is it simply makes the animal's digestive system more efficient. So in one way, you can actually say that the animal will get approximately 5% more energy from the same amount of feed that it was eating. So if they do drop in intake, which they usually always do under heat stress, you can be assured that if you have Excellerator going into that animal, you will be capturing more energy even though they are eating less. So this comes from a combination of ingredients. XL, our fermentation product that we have in Excellerator, is the primary ingredient, but we're also using a couple of other products that produce more enzymes that help digest this feed. So bottom line, more efficiency, which allows the animal to produce more energy, even though it is dropping in feed intake. I would like to say that Clint's comment about making sure clean water is out is very essential. The animal has got to have enough water, because not only does the moisture that it expels in panting help them cool, we don't want those animals to get dehydrated. And as they breathe fast, they are losing moisture. So that's probably another element that I should have mentioned, that dehydration is a very real possibility as heat stress continues to increase.
All right, thank you, Mike. Okay, so Clint, we'll go back over to you. Talked in pretty general terms and basic terms, like you said, common sense stuff here. But now, as we drill down here, as people are getting ready to go to the show, what can they do to make sure their animals are ready for that next show coming up?
Not only do we want to identify how to overcome and best manage heat stress, but also at the same time, you want to make sure that when you're at home, that the environment that you're raising your animal in is pretty close to the same kind of environment when you go to the show. And the word that I want to express here is making sure that you acclimate those animals from your barn, from whatever facility you have at your house, to the show barns or to the show. I've seen a lot of people where they've almost created the perfect environment at their house, but yet when they go to the show, it's not an enclosed barn. It's totally temperaturely controlled. So, and all of a sudden, those animals actually, their performance at the show goes down because their health is actually in jeopardy because they've created more stress because the animal actually wasn't acclimated to the environment that was going on at the fair. So, I think there's a lot of different ways that you can prepare these animals. The most important thing is that you have a calendar, that you're prepared, you stick to a routine, you understand animal husbandry, and then at the same time, while you're trying to overcome heat stress, you still want to be market ready and you still want to make weight because those are the most important things when you get to the show. And then on top of that, you're providing the highest quality carcass when those individuals invest in your project. Go ahead, Mike. Whatever else you think we need to add, go ahead.
Yeah, well, no, that you hit some of the very essential reasonings behind that. I would just like to add to that heat stress is just another stressful event that can cause that animal to stop eating. And we talked about it previously from heat of digestion, but really heat is also affecting that microbial population that drives rumen function. It affects the digestive process in the gut. It affects the immune system. And an animal that is hot just doesn't feel like eating. So you add that to all of the other stresses that you mentioned, Clint. That is another reason that Excellerator needs to be given to that animal before it ever gets on the trailer to head for the show. And so you're basically trying to avoid a loss of digestive capacity due to these both stresses of travel, stress of the show, stress of the heat. Now, granted, the animal may continue to drop in intake with all these stresses, but the Excellerator will help them keep those digestive mechanisms going. When they do cool off in the evening, those animals they will be better off and be more apt to eat when the cooler weather comes on.
Okay, gentlemen, great points there. So, Mike, how do you recommend we feed Excellerator?
So I think in this case, especially we have an Excellerator product in the paste form that I think would be ideal for this situation, especially after an animal already drops in intake. How do you get an animal to get Excellerator in its mouth if it's not going to eat? So the paste form it's a graduated tube. So it's designed with all of the ingredients of our dry Excellerator, but it's in the paste form. For large animals, it would be 15 grams a day. For a small ruminant, it would be 7 to 8. But if you wanted to top dress that, you could put it on the feed, or top dress on the feed to get that amount into the animal.
And Clint, where can our listeners get Excellerator, and of course your High Noon Show feeds as well?
So Excellerator and High Noon Show feeds in the Western Division are all owners of feed stores who are dealers of High Noon have access to get Excellerator and High Noon Show feeds. If your dealer does not carry them, And we also have Wes Alcott, and he owns Cruise Feed and Supply in La Habra, California. And he has an online store, Cruise Feed, which has a website, cruisefeed.com. So again, you can get Excellerator through any High Noon dealer. If your dealer doesn't have it, you can go online and you can go through Cruise Feed and Supply. We have a website, or you can call Wes Alcott at 562-690-6998. Or you can call me at 805-550-9857.
Okay, Clint, as we wrap up this episode, final thoughts. What would you like to wrap up with?
Common sense, and have an Excellerator paste in every show box.
And Mike, how about you?
I would just like to repeat some of the things that Clint mentioned. My number one suggestion would be to make sure the water is always present, provide plenty of shade, because that difference between the sun and the shade is probably at least 10 degrees. The other thing is that we didn't mention is do not ever work your animals during the hot weather.
Oh, great point.
That is just adding, any of us that's actually exercise realize how much hotter we get. And so that would be a 1 point. But also feed, as Clint said, feed earlier in the morning, feed later at night, because you're still getting the heat of digestion of the feed, but the ambient temperature is lower, so the animal has less heat to fight. And lastly, make sure you're feeding Excellerator to help keep that rumen and digestive system going.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. Appreciate your time and your information.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
You've been listening to the Excellerator All Natural Livestock Lowdown podcast. Learn more at acceleratorallnatural.com.